Welcome back my people to answering invincible hypothetical questions. You guys really liked part 1, so I had to run it back for you. And this time we have some even better questions, so without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, the first question says, what if the Immortal was as strong as Omni-Man? To be fair, Immortal in season 1 wasn't that far off Omni-Man strength-wise. Like, Omni-Man was defo stronger, but the gap wasn't as big as most people think. But let's say they were actually evenly matched strength-wise. What would change? Well, firstly, there's a good chance the Guardians win their first fight against Omni-Man. Because if you look at the parts where Immortal was fighting Omni-Man in these fights, he was doing some serious damage to him. Like in this part right here where Martian Man is holding Omni-Man, it's enough time for the Immortal to have done some serious damage to him if they were on the same level of strength. Maybe even enough to knock him unconscious. But even if the Guardians still lost this fight, the Immortal comes back again for round 2. And this fight would definitely go differently. Now hate on me all you want for this take, but if the Immortal and Omni-Man were already evenly strength, then the Immortal is winning this fight for sure. Why do I say that? Because you have to remember, this Immortal in the second round had a crazy adrenaline buff. And if they were already evenly matched in strength before, then that adrenaline buff is going to give him the edge in a fight. Because viltrumites don't experience the same thing when they get angry. They don't have adrenaline like that. And I don't think Mark would join in the fight at this point because he still wasn't like ready to fight his dad. But the next question says, what if Immortal came late and tag teamed Omni-Man with Mark? And I'm assuming this is going to be regular Immortal, no buff in strength. Would this change the outcome of the fight? To be honest, I actually think it could change it a little bit, but I do find it hard to believe that season 1 Immortal and season 1 Mark are enough to beat Omni-Man in a fight. But this would have made for a way cooler fight either way, and would have given the Immortal and Mark a closer relationship if they were to fight together against Omni-Man. Maybe they would have been like better friends, even if the fight ended up going the same way. But I'll let you guys answer this one. Is season 1 Omni-Man losing to season 1 Immortal and Mark? Let me know in the comments. Alright, this next one says, what if Mark never followed Cecil into the White Room? So if Mark was actually reasonable and he just decided, you know what Cecil, you're right and I'm gonna go home now, then of course they never would have gotten into a big fight in the first place, which would have never involved the Guardians, and so the Guardians would still be a complete team, and Cecil and Mark would at least be on speaking terms. They might not be close, but they would still be respectful to one another. And this would actually change more than you might think, because if the Guardians were still a complete team, then we wouldn't have had 2 separate fights involving the Guardians and the Teen Team, because in the Invincible War, there was 2 variants who attacked them respectively. So if the Guardians were still together and they were all at Guardians HQ, then they might have actually been able to save Darkwing 2 and Rex from dying in this battle. Because let's say they were all at Guardians HQ, they could have just fought this one variant together. And as for the variant that died with Rex, he probably would have been wrapped up in another fight anyways. But let's say they fought both variants at the same time. Are these 2 variants of Mark beating the Guardians of the Globe? I'll be real, they would actually stomp. I think the Guardians are good enough to take out 1, but they're not good enough to take out 2. I'm sorry. They probably would have all died in that situation. Rex would probably have to make his big sacrifice again anyways. I can see it being written that way because Rex's sacrifice was actually like a big part of his character, and it's why he's so loved now. So yeah, I can definitely see the story following similar suit in that way. And who knows, this could have also changed the outcome of the fight between Mark and Eve, and Omni Mark and Veil Mark, because maybe those 2 would have been with the Guardians at the time, so Eve would have never had gotten her leg broken, and Mark would have actually stayed on the battlefield instead of just crying next to her bedside. But more importantly than all of this is that Cecil wouldn't have had to use that device in Mark's head. But you know what? That thing was a ticking time bomb anyway. Since that thing was in his head, if Cecil ever felt threatened in the future, he would have used it without hesitation. So to be honest, I feel like that thing would have ended up going off at some point in the future, and their relationship would have just been ruined anyways, because that is such a wrong move from Cecil. Putting that thing in his head is crazy. Anyways, the next one says, what if Allen and Nolan showed up during the fight with Conquest? This would be crazy because Allen and Nolan aren't going to show up for a good minute, at least not until like late season 4. But if they came early, I mean, it would be crazy because Conquest is definitely not beating them in a fight. Allen and Omni-Man stomp for sure, but I'm more concerned about the aftermath. Would Earth see Omni-Man as a hero again? Because the fight with Conquest was being broadcast, so the world knew what was going on. And if Omni-Man just randomly pulled up in the middle of a fight with some random alien and killed the biggest threat Earth has ever faced, surely they would just forgive him. They can't still hold a grudge against him after he's literally saved the day. He is the GOAT now. Nobody can say anything. In fact, they may as well just forget what he did in the first place. But for all, I feel like the most likely thing to happen is that they're hesitant to accept him again, because I find it hard to believe that he just redeems himself immediately because he beat Conquest. Earth would still kind of look at him like, you better not do what you did again. And I highly doubt they would like respect him, but who knows, it could be written either way. Okay, the next one says, what if Mark never got his powers? You know what? I feel like one of 2 things would happen. One is that Omni-Man just crashes out and takes over Earth because he never needed Mark's help anyways. He just wanted to convince him to join. Or 2, he has another kid with Debbie, and within this time he probably comes to his senses and decides to abandon his duties from Viltrum because he would have had more time to think it over. I definitely think number 2 is the more likely option, because from early, Omni-Man was already showing signs of not wanting to really fulfill his duties on Earth. So if Mark just never got powers, I think he'd decide to settle down on Earth and just chill until Viltrum inevitably send another soldier to conquer Earth, and then he'd have to lock in for sure, because Omni-Man knows how important Earth is to Viltrum, so he's gonna have to be its sole protector now, for real this time. But this does make me wonder, why did Debbie and Omni-Man never have more kids in the first place? Surely it would have been beneficial for Omni-Man and Debbie to have had another kid. I don't know. Alright, the next question says, what if Allen went to Urath instead of Earth? It's actually such a shame we haven't seen any scenes from Urath, because I just know it's up in flames right now. But if Allen went there in the first place, I don't think it would change that much, because the coalition of planets was already watching Earth, and they knew a viltrumite was living on Earth, which is why they were staying away from it. So I'm pretty sure if Allen went to Urath, then he would have come to Earth later anyways, to meet someone from Earth to discuss the viltrumite on Earth. But if he had never gone at all, this would change a lot, because then he would have never got jumped by Lucan, Vidor and Thula, as they would have had no reason to question him about his experiences with the viltrumite of Earth. And that means we'd still have small Allen, because he only got that massive buff after recovering from that beating. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, it wouldn't change too much, because they'd probably end up coming into contact with each other anyways. Alright, the next one says, what if Amber and Mark never broke up? What a terrible idea! This couple sucks, bro. If they never broke up, I would be the biggest Amber hater, because these two just never worked. And I'm not gonna drag the whole "oh, Amber sucks" thing. Like, I know Amber in season 2 is a better written girlfriend, but still, I would not want them to have stayed together. But let's say they did stay together. It wouldn't change that much in season 2, but it would change Mark and Eve getting together in season 3. And this is a big thing, because Mark and Eve's relationship becomes far more important in the comics than it is now, because Eve plays a role in Mark's life that Amber could never fulfill on any meaningful level. And for the sake of avoiding spoilers in this video, I won't get into it, but I will say, I definitely would not want to see any Mark and Amber babies. Alright, the next one says, what if the Immortal had a kid with a viltrumite? That's a good one. I'm curious if his immortality would be passed down or not. But since the Immortal got his immortality from some radioactive meteorite when he was like middle-aged, I kinda doubt it, especially because he and Kate are gonna have kids in the future. And King Immortal did say that he outlived everyone he's ever loved, so that makes me suspect that he even outlived his own kids. So therefore, I do not think that he can pass down his immortality even if it was a viltrumite kid. But strength-wise, if he was to get with a viltrumite and they had a kid, wouldn't it just be like a watered-down viltrumite baby? Because right now, Immortal is probably about as strong as like an average viltrumite soldier. He's nothing special, and most of the viltrumites left are all really strong. So honestly, any kids he has with a viltrumite would be strong, but they wouldn't be that strong. Alright, the next one says, what if Thragg came instead of Conquest? Oh nah, if this happened, it would have been the quickest whitewash in history. Genuinely, Thragg is so OP. Plus, he's not like Conquest. Thragg would not waste any time killing Mark and anyone else who tries to stand in his way. But I get why Thragg didn't go, because Conquest should have been enough to get the job done. He really is the second strongest, and it is Conquest's own fault that he lost that fight, because if he was serious from the start, we all know that he would have made light work of Mark. But if Thragg came instead, I can't even imagine what he would have done to Earth and everyone who tries to stop him. He's too serious. He would not waste any time. So honestly, the best bet for Earth, if Thragg actually showed up, is to just submit and think of a way to stop him in the meantime. Anyways, that's pretty much it for this video. In my next video, I want to do some comic book coverage, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And if you have any ideas, be sure to leave them in the comments. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.